Policy, policy, policy. Policy, policy, policy. Policy, policy, policy. Policy, policy, policy.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Jiggy Jaguar Show, and welcome back to the Joe Citizen Show. We're doing both shows in one today, and there's a reason for that. I feel it's necessary to run I'm filling in for Jiggy Jaguar, as I have been for a couple of weeks. And by the way, Jiggy, thank you for everything that you have done for me and for our listeners and for America by giving us a platform of freedom of speech. And I appreciate that very much, Jiggy. But I'm running both shows simultaneously today because, well, to be truthful with you, if things go sour in the election, and God forbid the worst happens and Trump doesn't win, this will serve as the provisional farewell Joe Citizen Show. And there's a reason for that. Look, even with Trump, even once Trump is elected, we're going to have an uphill battle, a real uphill battle. But without Trump, there'll be no battle at all. And I have no appetite in having a show where I'm reporting daily the play-by-play destruction of the United States of America. I went through that for 8 years when Obama was president. I don't want to do that again. Now, I don't expect that to be the case because I predicted over 3 years ago that Trump would win in a landslide. I predicted he would win in a landslide and blow past DeSantis, and I was sorry that DeSantis even entered the race, but that was another situation. Nonetheless, I predicted it would be a landslide, the nomination, and it was, and that it would be the same with the general election, and I still believe that. So once we win Tuesday, there will then become a revitalized need and purpose for the Joe Citizen Show. It'll go back to what it was originally intended to do when I had the radio show in 2009 through 12. And that was to expose the real threat of jihad in America. Most people don't pay any attention to it. They think it's science fiction or something. Of course, our media, and wonderful media, has a lot to do with that, obviously. It won't matter anymore because eventually the truth shall ring through. And we will continue to sound the siren and expose Islamism in America and the plan of the Muslim Brotherhood for America and the world until the truth is recognized and everybody starts to get it, instead of just a handful of people that are labeled Islamophobes. Now, Trump will be working on making America great again, but he cannot start with the stickiest subject of all, being Islamic terrorism and jihad. And the danger of all the unvetted Muslims that came here from all over the world, bringing with them their lifelong hatred of Christians and Jews, not to mention their culture where the value of life is not exactly the same as it is here. That's why this whole notion of multiculturalism, years ago, I think it was Macron, Merkel, and Major, Germany, France, and England, all three of them on the same day. I know, because I was doing the radio show. I couldn't believe it. They all came out and they said multiculturalism doesn't work. So what do? Well, they kept on doing it. and here we are. So our job, look, is going to be to keep the spotlight on Islamists in America, to support the Trump administration in closing down their jihad agenda. But if we don't win this election, every soldier ever died for will be lost. That's why we need to bring back Trump. A good friend of mine, Sandy Kopowitz, came over 3 years ago. He said, "Hey, could you sing this?" He wrote these lyrics to the song "The Lady's a Tramp," and I said, "Well, I guess so." And I worked on it, and anyway, we fell in love with this project, and it's really about that's why we need to bring back Trump.
We have no border, not even a gate. We all get censored by the deep state. We just can't stomach another mandate. That's why we need to bring back Trump. Crime is so bad now, we just wanna hurl. An athlete can say he'll compete as a girl. Kamala's cackle makes your hair curl. And that's why we need to bring back Trump. We all want elections that are fair, but they don't care. They're woke, what a joke. Hey, California, you're now a real dump. That's why we need to bring back Trump. Stopping the pipeline is not a good bet. Defunding cops was the dumbest thing yet. Afghanistan, well, how dumb can you get? That's why we need to bring back Trump. We want our oil independence back again. For sure there would have been real peace in Mideast. We tried to warn ya, Joe Biden's a chump. That's why we need to. That's why we have to. That's why we've got to bring back Trump.
And those really are just a few of the reasons why we need to bring back Trump. There are many, many, many more. So thank you, Sandy Koplowitz. You know, I never thought that I would close out my music career, or bring it back, I should say, by doing political parodies. But hey, I knew I could do it, so I did. And it's something, well, there's nothing we could believe in stronger than the preservation of the United States of America for future generations. I've had the greatest childhood imaginable in the entire world. And I really hate to think that I will be one of the last of the free-range Americans. A free-range American, meaning you can say what you want, where you want, how loud you want. It's disappearing, folks. And we really have to take it seriously. You know, the original Joe Citizen show, it was a radio show on the now defunct WLVJ 1040 AM in Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach. And it went up and down the coast. And it was on at the very end of 2009 through 2012, where its main purpose was to expose the ongoing threat of jihad in America. But Joe Citizen himself, the persona, it began before that, way back in 2004. We were going back 20 years, when after Nick Berg had his head cut off overseas simply for being Christian, I had questions. So I knocked on the door of the Pembroke Pines Mosque with my questions. They were the type of questions that Geraldo Rivera or none of the media ever asked of our local mosques, nor have they to this day. They were pretty easy questions, I figured, so I thought, like, do you condemn 9/11? I mean, we just had 9/11 occur, and George Bush held hands with the imams, telling us that everything was just fine, and they're just as loyal to America as we are. And you know what? It was a complete lie. I hate to say it, but it was. We all wanted to believe him. I believed him, but it just was not true. And so these questions should have been asked of mosques after 9/11, but no. Everything was hands off. They were just left to their own devices. And nobody bothered to ask him, by the way, did you condemn 9/11? Do you promote Sharia law in America? Neighborhood mosque? Because Sharia law dictates that it replaces the United States Constitution, and it cannot coexist with this side by side. Look, I just want to tell you all what I know, folks. Okay, and so I knocked on the door of the Pembroke Pines Mosque. This large imam invited me in to be a special guest on Muslim radio. He opened the door. He let me in. He recognized me from a previous meeting I had been at, where the weak-kneed rabbi freaked out and would not let me ask the Muslim contingent questions I had, such as what I just began to now. And I said, well, look, yeah, I want to believe we're all friends here and I'm here on a peace mission, but how are we going to trust each other? How am I going to trust the Muslims here in America if I can't ask these basic questions and roll up my sleeves and put to rest what I hope are unnecessary fears? But I wasn't allowed to do that. And so the imam recognized me. He invited me in, took my shoes off. I was very polite and all this and that. He ultimately invited me to be a special guest on his Muslim radio shows, which I took him up on. And I appeared as Joe's citizen because I didn't want to jeopardize my young child. I warmly addressed the Muslim audience, the radio audience, explaining that if they came here to be part of America and part of the American dream, that they are welcome here and that America would embrace them with open arms. However, I also told them that if they came here hating Christians and Jews and came here to change us, or to change our way of life, then that was not immigration. That was invasion. And if that were the case, they could just go right ahead and pack their Sharia and get out. Now, they agreed on the air to circulate a letter among the mosques to sign off on some questions. Do you condemn 9/11, etc.? But of course, it never happened, and they strung me along for quite some time. What really nailed down to me what was happening with the Muslim community in America was the story of the 6 flying imams, which unfortunately may not even be familiar to you whatsoever. Therein lies part of the problems, right? The 6 flying imams showed me that the American Muslims were not some poor, victimized, misunderstood group in America, but rather they were pretty much continuing what they had done on 9/11. Now, look, no, not all Muslims are terrorists. But if you are a Muslim, a pure Muslim, then you have to accept every part of Islam, including Sharia law. And if you accept Sharia law, well, Sharia law dictates that you participate in jihad, either by the sword or by the tongue and the pen, either violent or cultural jihad. And that being the case, if you don't accept that, you're going to have to participate in jihad, well, then you're not technically a Muslim. So we could go around chasing our tail for hours on that subject. So you could either say Sharia compliant Muslim or a true Muslim. But if you're a true Muslim, you accept Sharia law. And that's dangerous because Sharia law dictates the advancement of Sharia law through jihad. That's what the purpose of jihad is for. Now, it became clear that CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations, they were not some goody two-shoes group like the ACLU. They were not the ACLU of the Muslims like we were led to believe to protect the poor, victimized Muslims from big, bad Islamophobes like me. No, actually, they showed their true colors by representing and defending terrorists. It didn't matter to them if they were innocent or not. And they even teamed up with the terrorists to create lawfare, such as with the 6 flying imams. Let me explain further. CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, is an offensive group, not a defensive group. They're an offensive group, and they're committed to cultural jihad or the advancement of Sharia law via lawfare. Now, one of their methods of cultural jihad and lawfare is to create a situation that will result in a lawsuit. Let me repeat that. Their method of cultural jihad or lawfare is to create a situation that will result in a lawsuit. I could give you many examples of this death of 1,000 cuts. Oh, Playland in Rye, New York, they were told not to wear the scarves on the roller coasters or whatever rides. And of course they wore them. Then they were told to leave. So they went and they sued Rye Playland and made a big stink about it that we're picking on Muslims. What a bunch of crap. That's how they operate. And this was planned. None of this was by mistake. So the one that showed me who the leaders, at least, of the Muslim community, not all Muslims. Look, Joe and Martha Muslim that came here to get away from jihad, that came here to get away from Sharia law, that came here to get away from all that. Boy, I feel sorry for them. They came here to be part of the American dream. And what happened? Well, Uncle Sam chose to jump into bed with the radical organizations like the Council of American Islamic Relations. So They boarded these 6 flying imams. They boarded a commercial airliner, and they created a bizarre behavior intentionally, which was meant to frighten the passengers. The way they were communicating with each other. I'm not going to get into all the details of what they did, but they scared the bejesus out of everybody, and they did it intentionally. They did it intentionally so that they would get thrown off the plane. And when the imams were ultimately sent off the plane, they said that they would not only sue the airlines, but they would sue each individual passenger. And they wanted their names and telephone numbers. The 6 flying imams said they would not only sue the airlines, they would sue the individual passengers, and they wanted their names. They wanted a list of their names and their numbers. So here they were in America, intimidating Americans. Here they were in America, intimidating Americans. So really, you 6 flying imams, you can go screw yourselves. But unfortunately, in America after 9/11, whatever Islam wants, Islam gets. You know, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets from damn Yankees. I mean, we turned into a bunch of weak-kneed wusses that forgot the word no. We didn't want to insult anybody. And so they've just motored right all over us because we've invited it with our weakness. Make a long story short, the Council of American Relations, CAIR, C-A-I-R, and it's no mistake that they want to confuse you thinking of the other group, CAIR, C-A-R-E, which is a good organization. They do that all the time. So CAIR, Council of American Islamic Relations, they got the 6 flying imams a financial settlement, when what they should have gotten was a boot up their ass. Now, after 9/11, I find this particular behavior disgusting, because if they don't love this country and they don't enjoy, then they should not be able to enjoy the benefits of living here. And if they try to take over this country, they need to have their asses thrown in jail or certainly out of this country. Now, CAIR has shown exactly who they are now. David Gobbets, he wrote the book Muslim Mafia with all the documents that were in there proving who they were. But it's almost a moot point now because CAIR came out of the closet. They came out of the closet already, and they said that they were behind the Hamas attack of October 7th, that they supported. They embraced it, in other words. We no longer have to prove who they are. We've been saying for 20 years they're Hamas in suits. But we hardly have to prove it anymore because they came out applauding what Hamas did on October 7th. So they commend October 7th, and they still have offices in most of our cities. What we need to do is outlaw Sharia law in America. We need to make Sharia law illegal and throw CAIR the hell out of here. And any mosque that promotes Sharia law, any madrasa, any Muslim facility that promotes Sharia law in America needs to be closed down, and that would solve the problem. There is no coexistence with Sharia law in the United States. There is no room for Sharia law and the United States Constitution. Sharia law dictates they don't share, okay? They would not put up with the U.S. Constitution. Ultimately, they don't care if it takes a year or 100 years. Now, does that make any difference? Because it shouldn't. An attack in slow motion is an attack. And if we just kick it down the road and say, well, it doesn't affect us, well, damn it, it's going to affect your grandchildren. And today, the way things are going, it's going to affect your children. It may affect us in our lifetimes. It sure is for the people in Europe. One of the last major events that I took place in was in Tampa. And where is that article now? The Tampa Bay Times. And what we were protesting was the fact that CAIR and their leader, Hassan Shibli, was waltzing into the local public high school to speak to the students. So that's what our protest was for. We were there saying that's not a very smart thing to do. And then the communists came there banging on their drums, getting in our faces, telling us that we're haters. And the press, they just don't understand what the right side of this issue is. Well, it's the 11th anniversary of September 11th. This was in 2012. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed still hasn't served justice. He's the guy that sawed off Daniel Pearl's head, and he was the mastermind of 9/11. And what did we do for him? Did we execute him? No. We built him a damn soccer field. That's what he's doing right now. He's playing soccer on the soccer field. And we're having to protest. We're having to be here to protest CARE speaking in our public schools. Is this how far we've come in 11 years, I asked? I really put this appeal to the media that I was speaking to. Typically, I went on to say, whenever there's a protest of this type involving mosques or Islamic centers or anything like that, our media, you people standing out there, often cover the event with the preconception that the protesters, us in this case, are the perpetrators. Ladies and gentlemen of the press and the media, we were not the perpetrators. The protest was to warn America and to push back against the literal brainwashing of our school children by Islamist interests. Now, what we do demand is zero tolerance of terror. Does that make us intolerant for demanding zero tolerance of terror? Now, CARE's ties with terror have been documented ad nauseum. So let me ask you, this is what I was saying to the press of the Tampa Times. Why in the world would we want CARE speaking to our kids in public schools while their parents are out at work? Now, if we want our culture to survive, if we want our country to survive, common sense dictates that Islamic organizations caught with their hands in the cookie jar of terror should be getting shut down and not sending their surrogates into our taxpayer public schools to lecture our kids. That's how I see it. I'm Joe Citizen. Thank you very much. But that's not how our media ever sees it. There's this sick alliance between the left and the Islamists in this country. One day they'll have to battle it out among themselves if they're the last two standing. But for the moment, the left has covered up for Islamism, and so has all of the press. Both the media and the left have been great cover for them and enabled them to carry on with their work of worldwide jihad. Obama, he tried to imagine away the war on terror. He called terror attacks man-made disasters. And he never acknowledged that Major Nadal Hassan, his murderous attack, screaming Allah Akbar, murdering his fellow soldiers, he never agreed that that was a terror attack. He called that workplace violence. And guess what? We have the same exact insanity today because, today Kamala Harris and Biden, they have, just like Obama did, they've omitted the words Islamic terror. They've omitted the words Islamic terror from our vocabulary. As simpleton as this is, musically that is, when I wrote this next parody, I wasn't trying to make musical history, I can guarantee you that. But it was a way of saying the harshest thing and yet having it be palatable. So the music is so easygoing that it was a way to try to couch what I was saying and get the message across. Let's see if I accomplished my goal.
They got the whole world in their plans. They got the whole wide world in their plans. They got the whole world in their plans. That's the Muslim Brotherhood. They want to kill all the Christians In this land, they want to kill all the Jews. In this land, they want to kill all the infidels. In this land, that's the Muslim Brotherhood. We gotta wake up, America, while we can. We gotta wake up, America, while we can. We gotta wake up, America, while we can. They want the whole world in their hands. They want to spread Sharia through this land. They want to spread Sharia through this land. They want to spread Sharia through this land. They got the whole world in their plans. It's political correctness. See what it's done. It's political correctness. See what it's done. It's political correctness. See what it's done. It's gonna kill the USA. Our country's gonna fade away. It's gonna kill the USA unless we grow some balls today.
And unfortunately, folks, we never did grow those balls. And 12 more years has now passed. And we're just that much closer to losing our culture. And that's really not, it sounds over the top, and it's not at all. If you don't think this is a real problem, all you have to do is turn and face Europe and find out what's going on over there. Witness how France, Germany, and England and more are on a trajectory most experts say is beyond the point of return from them becoming Muslim countries. In which case, you better look to the Muslim countries to see how non-Muslims are treated there. Things could become very ugly very fast, and Americans will have no idea why. You know, the Brits and the Germans and some of the Europeans were finally after all this time, starting to rise up against this failed forced mass migration, courtesy of the New World Order European Union. But they're being put down. They're getting cracked in the skulls. They're being arrested, put down, and they're being labeled as, oh, they're far right. But far right in Europe, all that means is that the far right are simply the native British or the native Germans who were tired of having their wives and daughters raped and getting beaten up by the violent and entitled massive Muslim immigrants and the Muslim patrols. Oh, yeah, the Muslim patrols. And they have nothing to do with their host country's culture. They never did. And they simply want to eventually do away with the infidels completely. Now, if you have not heard about this, it's simply because Jolly England, the Jolly England we knew, no longer has the freedom of speech. And in fact, they are censoring information over the unrest and arresting their citizens for posting videos over the uprisings. Furthermore, the United Kingdom said that they would extradite Americans like me for making video posts about the Muslim crisis over there. And they call it far-right hate speech. This wrong-headedness has been going around the world for decades. The Muslims, they beat up on the entire world, and then they have everybody tied up in knots, bowing down to them as if they are the victims. The odd thing about it all, and the experts have all told me this, that Europe could actually still save itself. Europe could still save itself, but they just don't have the political fortitude. They don't have the guts to say the emperor has no clothes and to declare that the Islamists have been perpetrating to overthrow their culture and succeeding, because they know that the West can simply not bring itself to blame a, quote, religion. But as al-Rasuli and many Islamist experts say, Islam is not a religion of peace, and rather, for 1,400 years, the Quran has been a roadmap, a bloodbath to destroy all and anything that is not Islamic. So once Trump wins the election, I will bring on experts like David Gobbets, Robert Spencer, Al Rassouli, Joe Kaufman, Randy McDaniels, Frank Gaffney, Brigitte Gabrielle, and many more. And we will continue until you all get it. It's not a topic I enjoy at all, but no one else is reacting to this. And I've got no choice. You know, I was a musician for a career, and I had no special interest in politics. I was performing on a cruise ships after my jazz career, big band career, and I was performing a music variety act when 9/11 took place. I watched very, very closely to see how Uncle Sam would respond. And I watched very closely at everything that would take place. And I don't know anybody more peaceful than myself. I don't even let insects drown in the pool. I know that sounds over the top, but it's the truth. All things equal, if the insect is still moving around trying to survive, I will get it out of the water. But I remember telling my mother at the time, I said, what we're going to have to do with these terrorists, we're going to have to terrorize them. We're going to have to be even more brutal than them. And of course, that never happened. And here we are 23 years later, and we still don't have a grasp of the situation. You know, we all took George Bush at his word that we had nothing to fear from the Muslims in America or their imams. But sadly, that was a flat out lie. And in fact, we had everything to fear. The terrorists were not ignorant. They were not poor. And they did not pervert Islam. And in fact, they were professional people, and they followed Islam to the tilt, to the core. And for the longest time, I just could never understand why George Bush would have done that. But my best sources advised me that the simple reason was wanting to avert confrontation with 1.5 billion Muslims. But we know that doesn't work with bullies in the schoolyard, and it doesn't work on the world stage either. We would not have needed to confront 1.5 billion Muslims, only the gung-ho jihadists. Now, they may conduct their war in slow motion at times, but that does not mean an attack is not an attack, whether you can see it in real time or not. And thanks to 12 years of Obama, Biden, Harris, they've intentionally infiltrated hundreds of Muslims into positions of power. In fact, they were so naive about it, they used to brag that, oh, we're putting devout Muslims into positions of power at every level of government. Now, when you think devout, in other religions, you would think, oh, well, devout, they're pious. They're probably the most peaceful of the entire lot because they're devout. Not with Islam. With Islam, if you're devout, that means you're obviously Sharia compliant. And if you are Sharia compliant, that means you believe in jihad to spread Sharia law. And your ultimate goal is a one world ummah under Sharia law. It's that simple. Infiltration was one of the biggest phases of their planned grand jihad of North America, infiltrating the systems, infiltrating everything, the school systems, law enforcement, politics, all with devout Muslims, which is the worst kind you could have. For decades now, Saudi Arabia has been funding 25,000 square foot mega mosques all over America. And they all come replete with their own radical imam. America is still oblivious. America is still literally oblivious that we are still under attack. This is Sharia.
Spreading Sharia. The most dangerous sound I've ever heard. Sharia.
Well, you may think that's a little melodramatic, but it isn't. And I don't think you'll find it melodramatic if it's your hand or your foot or your neck being cut off. You know, our problem in our culture today, we have a terminal spiritual illness. You hear the gun control, this and that. We've got a spiritual illness in America. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to claim to be Franklin Graham or anything like that, but we've only been getting worse ever since the Democrats literally threw God out of their convention in 2012. Remember that? That's right. The Democrats literally threw God out of the national convention. They voted him back in, but I don't think it works that way. I think God might have noticed that they threw him out. Getting him back in, voting him back in, I think it was a little too late. But the point is, they think they're so advanced. We don't need God in the platform. It's too corny, whatever their reasons are. And look what's happened to our society. Look what's happened to our culture. You can say, oh, okay, it's just a coincidence. Okay, just a coincidence. You think? You don't have to be religious to have respect for the Judeo-Christian principles upon which this country was founded, which made us the most benevolent country and the strongest country in the history of the world. You don't just take those Judeo-Christian values and flush them down the toilet. And that's basically what we've done. That's what we've allowed the Democrats to do. And blame guns, not the lack of souls. There's a lot of talk these days about retribution. No, Trump's going to want retribution. Well, these people are ass clowns if they think that we're going to let them just walk away after 10 years of their wanton destruction of this country. They literally set up, scammed, and framed American heroes like General Flynn, Navy man Carter Page. There were many others, George Papadopoulos, it goes on and on. They framed President Trump. They framed him, lying to America and all his supporters, lying to us, telling us that he was a Russian spy or an asset. And they cry about retribution now? Well, let me tell you, they should be crying. And it's very simple, Democrats. No one's above the law, right? That's all we've been hearing. No one is above the law. Well, let's see if that plays out, And all roads, let's make no mistake about it, all roads lead to Obama, who started the downfall of America. Obama was the worst poison pill in the world. America swallowed it. He fundamentally transformed America without even once ever having said what it even was. He single-handedly resurrected the Muslim Brotherhood during the Arab Spring in Egypt, and he was the only man in the world who could have done so. I've challenged everyone since 2012 to challenge me on that statement. Obama single-handedly resurrected the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was the only man in the world who could have done so. Now, Obama, Biden, Harris have been trying to save Hamas. I thought we're supposed to be getting rid of terrorist groups. This administration is the WOT. You've heard of the GOAT. Tom Brady is the GOAT, the greatest of all time. This administration is the WOT. It's the worst of all time. And there's so many reasons. How many have died on both sides of the border, of this non-existing border? It didn't have to be. We sucker punched. We lured these people up here. We lured these poor moms up here, dragging their kids up here with the scorching heat and the no water and dealing with the cartels and getting raped and murdered. We lured them to be up here. And then, of course, the fentanyl. Well, how many died from fentanyl? They apparently about 100,000 a year were murdered by the Chinese and the Mexican cartels who packaged the fentanyl to look like Xanax or even candy. 100,000 a year. And then we had the vaccine mandates. Remember that during COVID? How many military people, police, or teachers, important people that we need? Everybody's essential, but how many people that we really needed to help the country move forward were fired because they refused to take the vaccine? And they lied to us about ivermectin. And this is a biggie, ladies and gentlemen, because they literally murdered hundreds of thousands of Americans. Dr. Harvey Risch, he's the chief epidemiologist at Yale University. He estimates that at least 250,000 Americans lost their lives by not letting them have ivermectin. You know, with Donald Trump, we had the right to try drugs, but under Biden, we only had the right to die. They kept them away from drugs that could have saved their lives. And we could spend hours on this alone, but we had Jeff Hayes on the Joe Citizen Show months ago. The interview it's on joecitizenshow.com. And he revealed to us, he did the movie, The Real Anthony Fauci. And he revealed to us that ivermectin was ridiculed and trashed, which is what it was. It was, they smeared the drug. They usually smear people. This time they smeared the drug. And if ivermectin had been revealed to be the great therapeutic that it was, that Big Pharma would have not have been able to use the Emergency Use Authorization Act, the EUA. It would have cost them hundreds of billions of dollars of vaccines. And because of that, we were denied ivermectin, which could have saved many of us. They claimed they were dangerous, and they were not, and that they did not work when they knew, in fact, that they did work. You just never hear an apology from anyone about it, and certainly we never will. Biden's Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, threatened renewing the licenses of pharmacies, of pharmacists, and doctors regarding hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. How many died in Afghanistan? Now, the 13 are the ones you always hear about. Of course, there were hundreds that were grotesquely injured for life. But what about all the Afghans that also died as a result of that? And we abandoned U.S. citizens in Afghanistan. Even President Biden estimated that there were about 10% of the American citizens who were being left behind. But he never said a darn word about we're going to go back for them or we're going to get them out. No, they were just left there and not another word said about it. To this day, not word one about the 10% of Americans that we left in Afghanistan. So we abandoned U.S. citizens, their loyal interpreters, and their families, the interpreters' families, left to be tortured by the Taliban because we stupidly left behind information saying who our interpreters were and their addresses, getting knocks at the door, getting tortured in front of their families and then murdered. Really scenarios that we don't even have in horror movies. That's how bad. And this is going on to this day. And it's our fault. And America's always been the good guy with the white hat. We always helped the people that were in distress that could not defend themselves. We didn't expose who they were and leave them to one of the most awful groups in the history of the world, the Taliban. But unfortunately, that's exactly what we did. Now, the ones who got out of Afghanistan, they were just the ones who made it to the plane. They were just the ones that got there. So they could be just anybody. They were never vetted. We don't know who they are. They just got there before everybody else. Trump and Putin had a healthy relationship until Hillary's frame job drove a wedge between them, a wedge so big it pushed Russia into bed with China. The general thinking was always that America, we could fight 2 wars at once and defeat anybody. As long as Russia and China were not teamed up. Well, thanks to the radical Democrats, that's where we are today. You know, Biden gave billions of dollars to Iran, from which they funded Hamas in their October attack. With the growing success of the Abraham Accords that Trump put together, we were on the precipice of having peace break out all across the Mideast. But because it was Trump that did it, because it was Trump that achieved it, Biden ignored it. And real peace in the Mideast be damned. Instead, Biden-Harris re-empowered Iran to get the bomb despite their endless threats that they would use it to blow Israel off of the map. By the way, the Hawaii fires, those terrible fires in Hawaii that killed all those civilians living there, and Palestine with the train derailment and the chemicals that went in the air, and the hurricane victims in North Carolina and the other states, this administration failed them all.
Would you like to ride in my Chinese spy balloon? Would you like to spy in my Chinese spy balloon? We could spy among the stars together, you and I. For we can spy a little way in my Chinese spy balloon.
Yeah, it took them a long time to blow it away, though, didn't they? But there were so many things that Trump was correct on. He was right about China. He was right about that we'd have a super V recovery after the COVID. He was the only one saying there would be a super V recovery, and it did. It went back to where it was. Nobody backed him up on that. He was right about getting a warp speed vaccine. He was right about taxes, regulations, jobs, economy, unemployment, narrowing income inequality. You know, the list just goes on and on. He was right about the Mideast peace deal. He came up with the Abraham Accords. Nobody did that. He was right about moving the embassy to Jerusalem and that we should stop the caravans and the immigration loopholes. He was right about building the wall. He was right about restricting immigrants from jihadist countries. He was right about the military needing to rebuild and a NASA rebirth and the Space Force. And he was right about the war on Christmas and the war on Christians. And he was right about defending our flag and our energy independence. And he was right about the federal and Supreme Court justices and the rotten Iran deal and the Paris Climate Accord. He was right about all those things. He was right about NATO paying up. He was right about banning jihadists immigrating from terrorist countries. He was right about NASA, the moon, Mars, Space Force. He was right about the criminal justice reform and backing police, our Second Amendment, law and order, patriotism, optimism, the 55 hostages he got back. He was right about asking the Ukrainian President Zelensky about Burisma and Biden and the corruption. And he was right about the deep state and deep state actors like Mad Dog Mattis. He was right about Biden corruption. He was right about Clinton corruption. He was right about Hillary being the mastermind of a 4-year Russian hoax. And he was right about FBI corruption. He was right about a 2-tier justice system. He was right about media censorship, fake news. He was right about bringing Republican minorities into Congress, which he's done. And he was right about election fraud. He was right about a whole lot of things. Here's just a few.
He was framed by Hillary, FBI, and NBC. A deplorable hoax. He was right all along. He was right about the wall. Open borders, fentanyl. Everybody walking across without a wall. Stranded in Afghanistan, left to face the Taliban. Never have we left our people behind. Don't tell us what not to say. Freedom of speech is the American way. So keep your hands off Christmas, the flag and our traditions. He was right about that, he was right all along. You may not wanna hear it, some of you may fear it. Trump always ended up right, he was right all along. You may not wanna hear it, some of you may fear it. Trump always ended up right, he was right all along.
And they don't want to hear it, and they do fear it. They fear it, and they don't want to hear it, that Trump was, in fact, right all along. Hear it. And, you know, Trump really accomplished so much when you consider that Pelosi led up the resistance movement, where they basically said they were going to resist Trump at every moment. And they did. And he still managed to get so much done, despite the fact that he was smeared, he was sabotaged, he was spied upon, he was framed, he was persecuted, he was impeached, he was censored, he was disrespected. Pelosi ripping up that State of the Union speech for the entire world to see. He was harassed. That infantile White House press corps. And many believe he was robbed of his election. What's that? Do you hear that? Sounds like a train. Oh, this is the Trump train. I recognize it. All aboard! All aboard! All aboard that Trump train, folks. That was one of the closing numbers of my music act. And I couldn't think of anything more pro. That's the Orange Blossom Special. And it's a train. And right now, it's the Trump train. And we better hope and pray that this election goes the right way. There's only one answer that this election can have. You know, there's introduction music that you hear on this show. And I'm going to show you the music video that it comes from. I put this together in 2012 when Romney was running. And I decided to suspend the show and put my attention to the election and do this music video, but it didn't work. Romney lost. Forget the video, rather. Just read the text that I put there with it. Now, it goes by very quickly. That's why you have to just read the text. 3/4 of it we had to cut and leave on the editing floor. So here's America the Beautiful. And this was my jazz orchestra back in 2012. I love America. I've always been proud of America. I'm not both as a child and throughout all of my adult years. Remember 9/11. America will become great again. The world believes it, but there is discord. The people have to test it. Now it gets too fast for me to do the law. save the American dream. This year's November 5th. Did terrorists hijack and pervert their religion, or do they follow Islamic doctrine to jihad? Is this the real inconvenient truth? Why did Obama eliminate all law enforcement training manuals that refer to Islamic terror? Are Islamist organizations raising money on U.S. soil for terrorists? Is Sharia law compatible with the United States Constitution? What is creeping Sharia, cultural jihad, stealth jihad, civilian terror trials, Fast and Furious, Cornhusker kickback, Louisiana Purchase, Reconciliation, Solyndra, Light Squared, General Shelton, Fisker cars, and it goes on. This was back from 2012, ladies and gentlemen. And the upsetting thing about it is that many of these questions are still relevant today. Just about all of them are still relevant. You may not remember what some of those things were. Now, look, if this becomes our last Joe Citizen show, and I don't think it will be, we will win this election. We're going to win it going away. We're going to win it by a landslide. But just in case, I just want to thank you. And I want to thank Jiggy Jaguar for providing the platform. But I am confident that Trump will do what I've said ever since the last election, that Trump would come back and win, and wire to wire in a landslide. He did that with the nomination. And he will do that again. He will win the national election also, going away in a landslide. Because everybody wants to get on that Trump train. This is our last chance, folks. You know, no parent wants to live to see their child die. And no patriot wants to live to see America die. We can never, ever let that happen. This is the Jiggy Jaguar Show. This is also the Joe Citizen Show. This is Roger Homefield. Thank you for being with us.
Bye-bye, so long, farewell. Bye-bye, so long. See you in November at the polls where we are gonna have our say. Better see you in November. It's our chance to throw these fools around. Counting the days till we're rid of you. Counting the hours and the minutes too. Bye-bye, so long, farewell. Bye-bye, so long. Bye-bye, so long, farewell. Bye-bye, so long. Bye-bye.